The question here, the objective is to identify the basic types of questions and issues addressed by metaphysics. Much like Ben, I'm going over and above what would be expected in a course hearing, because I understand identify as, in some sense, listing. And I would rather not just be up here and list stuff at you. I would prefer to discuss and give some background and fill in some gaps. And this will help later on. I mean, there's, for example, the advanced course in metaphysics that you could take further on through Newlane, which goes into great more depth. So this is just a little primer. And then secondly, this will help you to understand what it is that you're listing, I guess. So metaphysics, as quite a lot of philosophy, we can get half the answer by looking at the name. So it's meta and physics. So physics, the study of the observable. It has a very strict methodology, and it uses, for example, a laboratory or experimentation. Then we have meta from the Greek, after and beyond. And so we get beyond the observable or the experimentable. Interestingly, Aristotle, from who we get this term, metaphysics, simply meant meta as in after. He wrote on physics, and then the next thing he wrote about was what we now call metaphysics, and he just meant this happens after physics. Chapter 1 is physics, chapter 2 is after physics, and yet it has become a philosophical term in its own right. And it's quite lucky that it's after physics, because it does have a link into the concept. It is kind of beyond physics or underlying physics or further than physics. So the question is, okay, metaphysical thought, what is it about? And for Aristotle, the first portion would be first causes. This is the principles of things, that which does not change, the underlying foundation of reality, and that which gives rise to things in the world in every sense of the word. And the second part for Aristotle is being, so that which exists or which is. This is immensely abstract, and so I will go into more concrete or practical details. So what does this mean? So ontology. This is the general idea of metaphysics, which covers essentially everything. And it's the typical idea, I think, that very many people have who are untrained or unschooled in philosophy. And they think, what do you do with philosophy? Oh, I ponder the deepest questions of reality. Yes, this is the case. It also makes ontology deceptively simple. And the moment you get into it, it gets very, very difficult. So it asks questions like, are there categories of existence? Does the number 3 exist in the same way that I exist? Does Hogwarts exist like Antarctica exists? Or the property or quality of wetness, right? Does that exist, wetness, like the relation of larger than? More specifically, then, we have special metaphysics, which takes smaller chunks of this larger question that humans are interested in. And so identity is a very popular one. What does it mean for me to be the same thing over time? If you consider me to be my body, yesterday and today, my body is different. This morning, I ate some stuff that I didn't have in my body yesterday. Some of my hair may have grown, I may have shaved. Our cells keep on replacing themselves over time. So what is it to say that I have an identity over time? What is it to say that two things are identical to one another? What do they have that makes them self-same? The quite fun example here is the ship of Theseus, and it's a simple thought experiment. Imagine you have a ship, and over time, parts of it break, and you replace them. The mast cracks, you replace the mast. Maybe some of the rigging gets a bit frayed, you replace the rigging. Over time, you've replaced every single part of the ship. Is it still the same ship as it originally was or not? And if it is, in what sense? And if it's not, why? Space and time, very difficult. My pen exists in space and time. Properties like wetness don't seem to exist in space and time. And then the fundamental question here is, do space and time exist in space and time? What sort of things are the concepts of space and time? Are they entities? Are they things? Do they simply exist in our world? Do we need to assume the existence of space and time in order to deal with things that then exist in space and time? Universals, one of my favorites. So what is it that particular things have in common, such as qualities and properties? Do all particular pieces of ice have coldness in common? And so what is this idea of coldness, and how do we attach it to everything that is cold? On the other hand, my coffee cup and my glasses on my face are both hard. They share this quality of hardness. And where does hardness reside? Is it only in our heads? Is it in our language? Is it in the world? Is it embedded in time and space? They seem to be, again, outside of time and space. Causality. We saw this in, for example, logical causality with Descartes. I think, therefore I am. The one idea necessarily leads to the following idea. This seems to be a special kind of relation between things. One thing happens, and then another happens. Hume, who, if I remember correctly, last week we briefly touched on, is incredibly skeptical of causality. He says we have to assume it, but we cannot show it in any way. One event happens, another event happens. We say the one caused or forced or led to the other one. We cannot show that, says Hume. This raises the question of free will. If one thing necessarily causes the next, in which way can I intervene in the sort of chain of causality by willing something? If my brain is who I am, and my mind is my brain, and my brain is a physical object, when one neuron fires, it inevitably leads to the firing of others. If this is what thought is, I have no control over this. It's simply happening to me, and then I don't have free will. This would be called determinism. Descartes has issues with determinism. He can only show that the mind exists. I think, therefore I am. So a thinking thing exists. But what about the physical world? And so he has dualism. The mind exists in one way, the physical world exists in another. They overlap, but they don't really have a direct relation with each other. This is a challenge for someone like Descartes. Again, one more point on Descartes. He does radical doubt. He doubts everything. But then his solution is, I think, therefore I am. He doesn't doubt logical necessity, right? The word therefore does quite a lot in his thought. He's unable to doubt that. It seems a very fundamental thing that we simply have to assume to go about. Necessity and possibility, another important topic. So are there things that exist in all possible worlds? Any world I can imagine, at all. The world in which I did not leave my bed at 7:30 this morning, but I left it at 7:35. Are there things that all worlds share? And so, for example, all worlds I can imagine would include the fact that triangles have 3 sides. But there are worlds in which I am not called Peter, for example. What sort of things carry through possibility? Which sort of things, or facts in this case, are necessary and which are not? So to answer the objective in a much simpler form, what are the basic types of questions and issues addressed by metaphysics? The questions are really what exists. This can be broken down into what kinds of things exist. Are there different kinds of existence? In other words, what is the fundamental nature of reality? And then the issues: identity, free will, consciousness, universals, time and space. Is there a God or gods? Is this inside time and space, outside of time and space? Is this the first cause that causes everything else, etc.? So yeah, that's a slightly more involved answer to the objective, but there it is.